Imagine you're caught between two completely opposing worlds, both drenched in blood and power. On one side are the historic streets of Sicily, where the Italian Mafia once secretly manipulated society through cunning and discretion. On the other side are the drug fields of Mexico, where cartels use guns and violence to control everything from borders to the hearts of people. These two organizations, the Italian Mafia of the 1920s and the Mexican cartels of the 1980s, are not only infamous but have also become symbols of criminal power. But the question arises, who is more dangerous? The Italian Mafia, with its sophistication and tightly knit structure, or the Mexican cartels, with their rapid expansion and openly violent strategies? In today's video, we will dive into their histories, methods of making money, political and social influence, media portrayal, and even their relationships with local communities to find the answer. And perhaps, the conclusion isn't as simple as you might think. Get ready to explore controversial stories, perspectives you've never heard before, and join us in answering the ultimate question, between these two forces. Who is truly the most terrifying ruler? Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels, two infamous names in the history of global crime, built their empires step by step based on unique historical and social contexts. To compare these two organizations, we need to turn back time and delve into their formation and development. Let's start with the Italian Mafia, a group that has become an icon in popular culture. With images of powerful dons hidden behind elegant suits and cigars wreathed in smoke. The Italian Mafia, or Cosa Nostra, originated in Sicily, Italy, in the 19th century. It was a period of turmoil when Sicily was under foreign rule, and the locals lived under the oppression of external powers. Initially, the Italian Mafia was seen as a force protecting the community, fighting against injustice, and shielding the weak from the cruelty of their rulers. But power, when accumulated for too long, often breeds ambition. From small protective groups, the Mafia evolved into a systematic criminal organization, gradually manipulating the economy and politics in the areas they controlled. A major turning point for the Italian Mafia came in the early 20th century, particularly during the 1920s when Prohibition was enacted in the United States. This ban on alcohol turned it into an illegal commodity, but the demand for it remained unwavering. This was a golden opportunity for the Italian Mafia to expand internationally, especially in the US, where the Italian immigrant community provided fertile ground for growth. Mafia families like Gambino, Genovese, and Bonanno quickly seized the opportunity, controlling the entire bootlegging supply chain. Not only did they produce and transport alcohol, but they also built a sophisticated distribution network reaching every bar and restaurant. Notably, they didn't stop at alcohol smuggling but ventured into extortion, protection rackets, running casinos, and gambling. In contrast, the Mexican cartels had an entirely different yet equally impressive beginning. Mexican cartels started emerging in the late 1970s and truly exploded in the 1980s when the demand for cocaine in the US skyrocketed. Mexico, with its geographic proximity to the US and its ideal position as a transit route from South America, became the hub of international drug trafficking. Cartels like Guadalajara, Sinaloa, and Medellin quickly took control of the entire drug supply chain, from production and transportation to distribution. Unlike the Italian Mafia, which relied on social networks and long-standing family ties, Mexican cartels operated like military organizations, with their own armed forces and ruthless violent tactics to protect their interests. What's fascinating here is the pace of development of these two organizations. While the Italian Mafia took nearly a century to build its empire, Mexican cartels needed only a few decades to rise as formidable forces. But why is there such a difference? Part of the reason lies in historical context. The Italian Mafia emerged during a time when legal systems were still rudimentary, and expanding power required discretion and long-term relationships. Meanwhile, the Mexican cartels appeared during a period when the global drug market was already established, and they merely needed to exploit the existing supply and demand dynamic to grow rapidly. Another debated factor is the difference in organizational structures. The Italian Mafia operates on a family model, with dons as supreme leaders and loyal soldiers carrying out their orders. This creates a closed, nearly impenetrable power structure. In contrast, Mexican cartels operate with a highly centralized model, with leaders like Joaquin, El Chapo, Guzman controlling the entire supply chain. However, this centralization also brings risks. When a leader is captured or killed, the organization can easily fall into chaos and internal power struggles. But what makes both of these organizations a global nightmare? The answer lies in their adaptability and ability to seize opportunities. The Italian Mafia, after the Prohibition era ended, quickly shifted to other activities such as gambling, construction, and controlling key industries. Meanwhile, Mexican cartels didn't stop at cocaine but expanded to heroin, methamphetamine, and marijuana. They constantly sought ways to maximize profits, even if it meant causing pain and instability to millions. Ultimately, comparing the Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels in terms of their historical development is not just a story of time and pace but also one of strategy and circumstances. The Italian Mafia symbolizes perseverance, sophistication, and tight-knit organization, while the Mexican cartels represent explosiveness, audacity, and overt violence. But the question remains, with such different paths of development, which organization is truly more dangerous? The answer likely depends on how we view power, violence, and their impact on society. Let's continue diving deeper into this story to explore their methods of making money, a factor that not only reflects their operational differences but also reveals their far-reaching influence on the world around them. A criminal empire can only survive and thrive if it possesses an enormous financial foundation, enough to sustain operations, consolidate power, and protect itself from threats. The Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels, though emerging from vastly different contexts, are masters at generating massive profits from illegal activities. However, their methods of making money differ so distinctly that they define the unique identities of each organization. Let's start with the Italian Mafia, particularly during the 1920s, its golden age in the United States. Fueled by Prohibition, while the U.S. government sought to eliminate alcohol from society, public demand remained undiminished. This was when the Italian Mafia capitalized on the opportunity, turning alcohol into a goldmine. They controlled the entire supply chain, from smuggling liquor from Canada to distributing it through speakeasies. What set the Italian Mafia apart was their ability to operate like a legitimate business. They didn't just sell alcohol, they built protection networks, controlled pricing, and even ensured smooth operations through bribing police and officials. Prohibition lasted just over a decade, but the Italian Mafia didn't falter when it ended. Instead, they quickly pivoted to other industries. Casinos, gambling, and protection rackets became their next major revenue streams. In Las Vegas, the Italian Mafia even established legal hotels and casinos to launder money from their criminal enterprises. What made them unique was their ability to disguise illegal activities under a legal facade. Businesses like restaurants, construction companies, and real estate ventures not only helped them launder money but also reinforced their power within communities. In contrast, Mexican cartels took a completely different approach. Rather than diversifying their operations, they focused almost exclusively on one sector: drugs. The 1980s saw an explosion in the demand for cocaine in the US, and the Mexican cartels quickly seized this opportunity. Unlike the Italian Mafia, which relied on discretion and tight organization, Mexican cartels operated openly and violently. They controlled the entire drug supply chain, from production in South American labs to transportation across the Mexico-US border. Drug tunnels, concealed trucks, and even private planes were employed to ensure their products reached consumers. What makes Mexican cartels exceptional is the sheer scale of their profits. A single shipment of cocaine successfully smuggled into the US could yield millions of dollars. With such vast sums of money, the cartels not only solidified their power domestically but also expanded their influence globally. This raises the question: does focusing on a single industry like drugs make the cartels more vulnerable? Or is this focus the key to their success? Another critical aspect is how these organizations use money to maintain power. The Italian Mafia, with its closed organizational model, used money to strengthen its network of relationships. They bribed officials, police, and even judges to ensure their operations ran smoothly. On the other hand, Mexican cartels didn't just use money for bribery, they heavily invested in their private armies. These forces were equipped with modern weapons, from rifles and armored vehicles to helicopters, turning the cartels into unofficial military powers. Like the Italian Mafia, Mexican cartels also used money to build their image in the eyes of local communities. Drug lords such as El Chapo became famous for their lavish wealth. They built mansions, hosted extravagant parties, and even distributed money to the poor in the areas they controlled. While these actions had symbolic value, they did little to erase the cartel's violent and brutal image. Unlike the Italian Mafia, such gestures weren't enough to create a facade of legitimacy. So, between these two approaches, which is the more effective way to generate revenue? The Italian Mafia, with its diversified economic activities, or the Mexican cartels, with their single-minded focus on the drug trade? This question is not easily answered, as each organization has maximized its unique advantages. The Italian Mafia benefited from time and tight organization, while the Mexican cartels leveraged the explosion of the global drug market to grow rapidly. However, the more significant debate lies in how money shapes the nature of these organizations. The Italian Mafia, with its sophistication and discretion, built an image of underground businessmen rather than overt criminals. Meanwhile, Mexican cartels, despite their far greater wealth, could not escape their image as violent gangs. Could this difference be a direct result of their respective methods of making money? And if so, does public perception truly reflect the essence of these organizations? Stay tuned as we delve further into their political and social influence, where their true power is tested and revealed. As the power of the Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels grew, money and violence were no longer their only tools to maintain their status. An organization only becomes truly terrifying when it can deeply infiltrate political systems and influence the lives of millions. The Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels, though employing different methods, have both left indelible marks on politics and society during their golden eras. But who truly held greater power? For the Italian Mafia, their political influence was built on quiet yet powerful relationships. In 1920s America, the Italian Mafia quickly infiltrated political systems in major cities like New York, Chicago, and Las Vegas. They bribed police, local officials, and even judges to ensure their illegal operations were protected. But they didn't stop there. The Italian Mafia sought to influence elections. By leveraging money and threats, they helped place friendly politicians into positions of power, receiving protection and cooperation on public policies in return. The Italian Mafia's methods were neither loud nor openly violent. They controlled from behind the scenes, creating an illusion of stability and society. Many residents in areas like Sicily or Little Italy in New York even viewed the Mafia as part of the local system, a force that replaced a weak government. For example, if someone experienced theft, the police might do nothing, but a simple visit to the family's people would resolve the issue. This combination of soft power and underground authority allowed the Italian Mafia not only to survive but also to thrive for decades. In contrast, the Mexican cartels chose a completely different path. They openly challenged and defied the government from the very beginning. During the 1980s, when cartels like Guadalajara and Medellin reached the peak of their power, they didn't hesitate to use violence to control politics. A series of assassinations targeting politicians, police officers, and journalists highlighted their no-compromise strategy. One of the most shocking events was the assassination of DEA agent Enrique Camarena in 1985. His death not only exposed the brutality of the cartels but also underscored their willingness to directly confront even the US government. However, Mexican cartels didn't rely solely on violence. Like the Italian Mafia, they heavily invested in bribing officials. Their methods, however, were often more direct and brutal. A famous saying among the cartels is, plata o plomo? Silver or lead. You could accept their bribe and cooperate, or refuse and face death. This strategy turned the cartels into dominant forces in many regions of Mexico. where the government's control was nearly non-existent. In some cases, the cartels even replaced the role of the government. They built schools, provided jobs, and ensured security, all to maintain the loyalty of the people. The difference between the Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels is not only in how they manipulate politics but also in their societal impact. The Italian Mafia, despite its illegal activities, brought a sense of stability to the areas they controlled. People often felt safer under mafia protection, knowing they could rely on the organization when needed. This, of course, was not out of kindness but a strategy to consolidate power. On the other hand, the Mexican cartels created an environment of chaos, where violence became a part of daily life. Bloody purges, public shootouts, and civilian terror turned cartel-controlled regions into places where people lived in constant fear. Yet, this fear became the cartel's greatest weapon. By spreading terror, they not only protected their interests but also made it nearly impossible for the government to intervene. However, a key debate arises here. Is the Italian Mafia's quiet approach truly more effective than the Mexican cartel's open violence? The Italian Mafia's discretion allowed them to operate for long periods without much attention. But this subtlety also had a downside. It limited their influence to areas they could control. Meanwhile, the Mexican cartels, despite facing strong crackdowns, managed to rapidly expand their power thanks to their strength and visibility. In the end, both the Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels left deep impacts on the societies they controlled. One brought a facade of stability, while the other sowed chaos. But the question remains: which organization is truly more dangerous? The sophistication of the Italian Mafia makes them harder to detect and eliminate, while the Mexican cartel's violence makes them a clear and immediate threat. The answer isn't simple, but it's clear that both organizations demonstrate how criminal power can exceed anything we might imagine. Stay tuned as we delve deeper into how media and public perception have shaped the narratives surrounding these infamous forces. In the world of crime, media is not merely a tool for reflection but also a weapon for building power. The Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels, though taking different approaches, clearly understand the value of controlling their public image. What's fascinating is how media and popular culture have contributed to creating contrasting legends about these two organizations, shaping vastly different perceptions among the public. The Italian Mafia, since the 1920s, has been closely associated with the image of powerful and mysterious dons. They are often portrayed as sophisticated criminals with principles and a strong sense of family. Film and popular culture have played a significant role in romanticizing the image of the Italian Mafia. Movies like The Godfather depict them as figures who are both fearsome and admirable. Vito Corleone, a symbol of power, appears not only as a ruthless don, but also as a father figure, a clever strategist, and occasionally a protector of the community. Iconic lines like, "I'm gonna make him an offer he can't refuse," have become synonymous with the subtle yet effective power of the mafia. However, this image is not just a product of cinema. The Italian Mafia has long been proactive in building a social facade to mask its true nature. They organize charity events, participate in religious ceremonies, and even assist poor families in the areas they control. This support not only fosters loyalty within the community but also sends a message that they are protectors, not destroyers. Of course, all of this is just a small part of a more sophisticated media strategy. In contrast, the Mexican cartels have not been as fortunate when it comes to media portrayal. Their image, rather than being romanticized, is inextricably tied to violence and chaos. International news is filled with images of massacres, bloody purges, and bodies hanging from bridges as warnings. Unsurprisingly, Mexican cartels are seen as the embodiment of brutality. Yet, this perception is also part of their strategy. Unlike the Italian Mafia, Mexican cartels do not try to hide their violence, they use it as an effective communication tool. Public killings are not just punishments but statements. Anyone who opposes them will pay the ultimate price. This raises an intriguing question. Has their overt brutality harmed the image of the Mexican cartels in the media? Or is this exactly how they want to position themselves in the public eye? Some cartel leaders, like Joaquin El Chapo Guzman, have even leveraged social media and modern platforms to build their reputation. They present themselves as Robin Hood figures to the poor, distributing money, building infrastructure, and organizing grand festivities. However, these efforts are not enough to obscure the reality that they spread fear and instability. The starkest difference between the Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels lies in how they are depicted in popular culture. The Italian Mafia, thanks to iconic films and novels, is portrayed as a symbol of orderly power. Meanwhile, the Mexican cartels are labeled by the media as uncontrollable forces of destruction. This contrast may also stem from the nature of the two organizations. The Italian Mafia operates in the shadows, maintaining a discreet and enigmatic image. In contrast, the Mexican cartels dominate openly, making themselves the focus of attention. But does the public image constructed by the media truly reflect the essence of these organizations? Is the Italian Mafia genuinely nobler than the cartels? Or is this merely the result of a more sophisticated media strategy? And are the Mexican cartels, often deemed more brutal, truly more dangerous, or are they simply operating in an era where modern media amplifies everything? This is a difficult question to answer, but it's undeniable that the public images of both organizations have significantly shaped how we perceive underground power. To better understand how they maintain that power, let's continue with an analysis of their relationships with their communities, a critical factor in their long-term survival. If the power of the Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels is sustained through money and violence, then their relationship with the community serves as the foundation for their long-term survival. An organization cannot endure without the support, or at least the silence, of the people living under its influence. Interestingly, both the Italian Mafia and Mexican cartels understand this well, but their methods of building relationships with the community are strikingly different. The Italian Mafia has long positioned itself as the protector of the community. In areas like Sicily or Italian-American neighborhoods in the U.S., the Mafia is not merely a criminal organization but also an integral part of local life. In contexts where the government is often weak and distant, the Mafia emerges as a force ready to address any issue. Lost something to theft? The Mafia will recover it for you. Family disputes? The Mafia will mediate. Of course, this assistance comes at a price: loyalty, respect, and sometimes fear. Yet, for many, this was a price they were willing to pay. The Mafia's presence in the community extends beyond protection. They often sponsor religious ceremonies, fund cultural events, and support impoverished families. In the U.S., major Mafia families like the Gambinos and Genoveses not only controlled the underground economy but also shaped the social life of entire neighborhoods. This created a tight-knit network where residents felt safer relying on the Mafia than on the police or government. In contrast, the Mexican cartels employ an entirely different strategy. In the regions they control, the cartels do not shy away from using violence to establish dominance. At the same time, they also strive to portray themselves as heroes of the poor. Drug lords like Joaquin, El Chapo, Guzman are known for distributing money to the people, building schools, hospitals, and even funding religious festivals. For impoverished communities, where the government is virtually absent, the cartels often appear to be the only viable option. However, this support does not always translate to gratitude. Unlike the Italian Mafia, which maintains stability in the community, the Mexican cartels frequently create chaos, internal conflicts, public shootouts, and violent crackdowns on dissenters turn cartel-controlled areas into places dominated by fear. Despite benefiting from the cartel's charitable initiatives, residents live in constant tension, knowing that any action could lead to catastrophic consequences. One notable difference is how these two organizations manage relationships with those outside their communities. The Italian Mafia often restricts violence to within the criminal underworld. Hits and disputes are typically kept discreet, avoiding harm to innocents. This not only helps them maintain good relations with the community but also reduces attention from authorities. Conversely, the Mexican cartels operate without such boundaries. Public massacres, attacks on journalists, politicians, and even innocent civilians have cemented their image as brutal and fearsome in the eyes of the community. This raises an important question. Does the Mexican cartel's overt brutality cost them community support? Or is it simply their method of maintaining power? For the Italian Mafia, is their loyalty and respect-based relationship truly more sustainable? Or is it merely a more polished facade compared to the cartel's violent dominance? This comparison reveals a striking paradox. The Italian Mafia, despite being a criminal organization, has been romanticized as part of local culture, whereas the Mexican cartels are viewed as the source of instability and violence. But does this truly reflect their nature? Or is it merely the result of how the two organizations choose to build and maintain their relationships with the community? Ultimately, the relationship with the community is not just a matter of strategy but one of survival. The Italian Mafia has demonstrated that a criminal organization can endure by integrating into society. The Mexican cartels, while using overt violence, have shown that fear can sometimes be the most powerful tool of control. But who is truly more dangerous? This is perhaps a question with no easy answer, as each organization has its own way of dominating and influencing society. The Italian Mafia, with its sophistication and deep-rooted history, or the Mexican cartels, with their overt violence and absolute power, each represents a different facet of the criminal underworld. But ultimately, who poses the greatest threat? Perhaps the answer depends on your perspective. Is it the quiet manipulation or the open destruction? If you found this story intriguing and want to dive deeper into more controversial topics like this, don't forget to hit like, subscribe to the channel, and share your thoughts in the comments below. Join us as we continue to uncover the dark corners of history and power.